Okay. Sometimes the no-duh thought comes into my head after being asked a question, and then I go, I've never made a video about that before. Let's actually talk about the cylinder, or it would be the hyperboloid actually, but nobody knows what a hyperboloid is. Stabilization, and this is not anything against IBIS at all. But let's talk about OIS and in-body image stabilization or stabilized sensor. Let's talk about the absolute best way to utilize your IBIS through specific hand-holding techniques by understanding what's going on. Let's take a look at this really crude diagram. We have our camera over here, our stabilized sensor here. This is generally the point, depending on the size of the lens, whether it's a huge prime lens or a simple telephoto, where the optical image stabilization or vibration reduction, both the same damn thing, is occurring. Obviously the end of the lens. So, do you know what a teeter-totter does? Everybody's seen a teeter-totter, right? Which end of a teeter-totter moves the most? Which part of it moves the least? The answer is it moves radically on both ends and not much in the center, right? Right. Pure physics. This is why some of like the 200, 500 Nikkor, on and on and on, all these lenses have 6+ stops of stabilization, almost to the point where it seems magical. It actually occurs, just like the teeter-totter, where the least amount of movement's going on, i.e. where the most effective image stabilization is occurring. Right here where the VR or OIS is occurring, this would be the end of the lens. Over here is the IBIS sensor. Once again, which end is moving the most? Here and here. Which end is moving the least? Right here. What's the best way you could get the most effectiveness out of your camera stabilization, in-body image stabilization, shooting at, say, an event where you're not allowed to use a speed light? You're shooting high ISO, really slow shutter speeds. I bet most of you have both your hands on the camera, right? That would be not so conducive to the most steady hand-holding techniques for, say, for example, you're using, I don't know, whatever lens that has no image stabilization, or, well, any lens with, like in case of, whether it be a Sony or whether it be a Fuji, a lens that has stabilization working in conjunction with the IBIS. If you can always stabilize either end at high ISO, low shutter speeds where no flash capability is permitted, I assume most people, if you're a working photographer, are going to have a speed light or two to take everywhere, and the only reason you have for not using it is A, it's too far away, or B, you're not allowed to use a speed light any other time. Obviously, sensor saturation trumps everything. See, most people have their hands on the camera only, and since, in the case of a teeter-totter or the cylinder or a toilet paper, this isn't a toilet paper tube, paper towel tube, you're sitting here holding the camera like this. Where's all the motion occurring? Both of my hands are on the camera. If you see it occurring on the end of the lens, it's also occurring radically so on the end of the camera. Well, you're holding the camera. It's moving less here than it is on the end of the lens. You're correct. But what it is doing is moving excessively. If, say, for example, you only have in-body image stabilization, an unstabilized lens, say the 16 to 55 2.8 Fujifilm lens, which is a non-OIS lens. Both your hands on the camera? No. You see this? Looks like an eagle's claw, right? Try this once. Just go out or turn the lights off in your house. Take about 10 shots as you normally would with image stabilization on, like this. Boom, boom, boom. I know this is what you're doing. Both hands are on the camera. You're holding as steady as possible. By the way, this is the other reason why I actually use a hand strap. Not only does it keep from dropping the camera unnecessarily, but what it does is it allows me, instead of grabbing a hold of the camera like this, something I taught when I taught archery, is the more contact points you have, because there's an enormous amount of muscles in your hand, and no matter how little you shake, too much excessive contact introduces excessive muscle contact with the camera, thereby causing excessive shake. What it's able to get me to do is bring my hand away from the camera, so I only have these bony contact points with the camera, but not my actual hand grabbing the camera. So I'm actually transferring a lot less shock to the camera. That's actually the primary reason why I use a hand strap. But if you're only using IBIS, say a non-stabilized lens, high ISO, low light conditions, no speed light obviously, and you want the maximum performance out of your IBIS instead of both hands on the camera, This is in the case of the, well, nobody knows what a hyperboloid is, but you just say it's a cylinder. It's a cone of shake where all the movement is occurring at both ends and not much in the center. Means, logically so, your best option for high ISO low light performance stabilization of your camera, which already has IBIS. Well, my camera has IBIS. Well, that's wonderful. It's able to shoot at slower shutter speeds with less shake. But what if you're able to do a lot better? Instead of doing this number, bring it out to here. Let's take a look at this. I'm going to over-exaggerate what I've got going on here. Well, it's this as opposed to this. You see this? This is rock steady. You see this? This is not. You actually got one end, you got your hands on one end of that cone of the front of the lens and the back where the IBIS is. The IBIS is not fighting with your slow shutter speeds. The IBIS is fighting with your excessive hand contact and excessive shake because you got both your hands on the camera. For best stabilization, simplex geometry, bring one hand out to the front. I don't care, well actually even this is too many contact points. I actually see a lot of people with their hand grasped around the lens. Same point, you got too many muscle, too many contact points. Tip of my fingertips really resting on my fingernails. I'm just using these 3 fingers as a tripod for the end of that lens and a really slow shutter speeds. And test this yourself. Don't take my word for it. Take 10 shots as you normally would like this, and then 10 shots like this, and see how much slower you can shoot. And the answer will become self-evident within about 5 minutes of having completed your test. This is undeniable. Try it. Simple geometry. Some of the stuff like these videos like this I take for granted. It's like, you know, I not made a video about this, but this is important. But anyway, this is directly applicable to in-body image stabilization with a sensor, whether that be an OIS lens and IBIS, or a non-OIS lens, or a non-VR lens. Like an adapted lens and a simple in-body image stabilization. Bring your second hand out to the end of the fulcrum point to reduce the amount of motion in the entire system, because you've got a lens body system. Bring everything back here. There's too much excessive shake, and your image stabilization is fighting that shake. Give your IBIS as little shake as possible to fight with. Bring it from here out to here. Okay? Just try it. Remember, 3-point. Do this number, too much muscle contact with the lens. This is also bad. It's better, but it's also bad. This is better. Like I said, this is also the reason why it's a really good idea. This actually has 3 benefits. The 2 primary ones being, keeps me from dropping my camera, which I don't have an issue with. But the primary one is it lets me remove my hand from my camera. Also, you know, get that hand camera sweat. While you're outside, you're holding your camera too much, you just bring your camera away. But it also reduces the contact points, so you actually have much less shake induced in the camera. Much less shake. Thank you so much for watching. This is the reason why too. Like in retrofit for earthquakes, they actually chop out the foundation of these buildings in San Francisco and other places, and they put in these tiny single point contacts, and those contacts are springs. So they've removed where the building interfaces the entire ground to shake. They've destroyed the foundation, propped it up temporarily, and they stuck in these single points. They not only use springs most of the time, they use huge, super thick rubber plates. So it's got super, you know, endlessly less, a great deal less amount of contact surface between the ground and the building. But what contact there is on rubber pads or springs, and it's allowed to shake. This is actually how NORAD in Cheyenne Mountain is suspended. It's actually not in the mountain. It's sitting in a box, and that box is sitting on hundreds of little springs. Well, really, not little springs. They're actually super beefy springs. But anyway, all the stuff I taught in archery and shooting skills and sports, which I was really good at, is applicable to much better hand-holding techniques for photography. I hope you like this video. If you do, you can click the link below. Tell me to jump off a cliff, but try this yourself. You will find out very quickly that it does work, and works very well. Thank you. Bye. Ba-dum, ba-dum, bum.